Good afternoon. How you doing, Brock?
Doing well. How about you?
Doing all right.
Good.
I hear today that we're going to be talking about the discovery process. And I'm curious, just out of the gates, what would you say you want to be the main outcome of a discovery process?
Uh, well,
And maybe we should
having.
and maybe we
Go,
should step
go.
back because you and I both know what we mean by the word discovery, and I say that out
Oh, sure.
loud. Let's set a little bit of groundwork here. When we talk about discovery, we mean the phase of a software project that is sometimes called requirements gathering or definition or assessment. Basically, the period of work before the software development starts, where you're working with the customer to figure out what the software should be that you're going to build.
hmm
All right, so with that definition in place, what would you say is the major desired outcome of the discovery process?
Well, I think kind of the client, from the client's point of view, they should have a a much better, clearer idea of what they want to solve, the problem that they're trying to solve. Um, from uh, my standpoint, being like the architect on a project, I kind of want to know what the boundaries of um, the problem set that we're trying to solve, with an eye on future development and how the client's going to want to extend the project past what we're building. Because invariably, when we build a project, we want to know, or like I don't want to future proof it, but I also don't want to be put into a situation where I would think, if I had thought about this or known that these, you know, 10 things were going to be added later on, I would have done something completely different. Um, at the end of the discovery, I kind of want to know what the scale is, uh, um, what environment I'm going to be living in. And by I mean what development
Yeah.
environment I'm going to be working in, how it's going to be deployed, where it's going to be deployed to. Is it going to be on premises? Is it going to be up in the cloud? Which cloud? Um, uh, I kind of want to get a feel for um, some of the broader design patterns that we might use. Like if we are going to be using uh, like a message bus, or we're going to be streaming data into our system, uh, how kind of have a feel for the types of technologies I'm going to need to kind of think about as I'm choosing my parts to kind of put together. Um, uh, Storage probably would be another one, and security.
So,
Uh,
one of the things that's interesting about your answers is that you're talking much more about the ilities than about features. And when I say ilities, I mean things like deployability, maintainability, uh, se- I guess security doesn't, securability.
yeah, the
Uh,
securables. Yeah,
like, there's a lot of characteristics of an application that you want to get in a discovery that go beyond what should this screen do? What should that button do?
and that's absolutely right, because at the end of the day, I probably don't care too much about how each individual screen works. Like if I'm going to be displaying models, like 3D models on in a page, um, I need to kind of make sure that uh, I have that scalability in place. I need to make sure that I pick the right tools to be able to serve that stuff up. Um, so, from my standpoint, uh, like that the abilities are all. It's a lot of what architecture is. It's not just the small little building blocks inside of the code that we write. Like there's
Hmm.
a lot of other things that fall into the architect's domain, like deployability, the securables. Like if I don't know how or what we're going to do to secure uh, the requests coming in, or you know, prevent DOS attacks, it's going to be pretty difficult. Um, we don't have, um, like thinking about like the code. Like I don't care that to know right now during a discovery what or how the validation is going to work. Yes, it is non-optional that we are going to be
Yeah.
validating input. We are going to be having multiple pages in the application. We're going to have undoubtedly some business logic inside of the components that we build, but that's all, like, to me, details that can be deferred until later.
So one of the other concepts that we sometimes talk about when we do discoveries, and I'm going to take this directly from John Fazaro, is we
Mm-hmm.
want to focus more on outcomes than features.
Mm-hmm.
So no one ever comes to us at Aptera and says, you know what, I really just want you to write 250,000 lines of code, right?
Yeah,
That's if someone wants that, find me on LinkedIn. We can do that for you.
yeah. And you might be about 1,000 lines away from there if you did it in Node.
But
Just starting the application up.
but what people do come to us for, and this is not specific to Aptera, it's all, probably
Hmm.
specific to all custom software developers. They have some problem or
Hmm.
some process, and they need a solution or they need an optimization. Right
Hmm.
there is some tool that they need to be able to do their work more efficiently.
Hmm.
And so getting the idea not just of what feature sets they want, but what outcomes they're trying to achieve. That then becomes one of the big ideas in the discovery.
Hmm.
I think one of the challenges we sometimes face is that potential clients come to us with a lot of that design done in their
Thought
head.
through. Yeah. They tried to solve the problem, which I don't blame them. In the
No.
past, they've probably uh, gone to their IT department and said, um, I want to be able to do this. And then the IT department is like, well, how would you like us to do that? And thinking that they're empowering the end users, but they're not really giving their end users options. They're asking the end user for the solution that they can go implement.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
And
so.
so, and it's also possible that before they wanted custom software done, they had done something in a low code solution where they had to think about, what buttons do I need, and what should the text say, and how, what columns do I want to display in this table. One of the things that we hopefully provide is, uh, value beyond just like, oh, we implemented what you asked for. Like, we want to be able to provide input into your user experience, input into your workflow. And this gets back to one of the conversations we had a couple of weeks ago about the value of software and trying to measure how much we are able to optimize business processes.
Yeah. From and so from my standpoint in a discovery, like I kind of want to know what some of the features are, but I kind of feel like um, the features. are important, but like I only need to be tangentially aware of them in terms of potentially seeing correlations like, hey, we have these three features. These are actually two features, but you're splitting them. Like there might be a different way to split these features that solves a lot of problems that you have downstream. But we have business analysts that are actually usually pretty good about um, feeling that stuff out. And um, yeah. So what do you look for um, when you are doing some of like the pre-discovery stuff uh, and or going through the discovery process to kind of be able to hand it off?
Before I answer that, I just want we got a question in the chat from Tail Learn Code. I'm just going to read it here. I think that one of the key differentiators between onshore and offshore development, a lot of offshore is just telling them what you want them to build instead of figuring out what should be built. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, definitely.
There is a lot of software development that is done offshore, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the developers that live overseas. Certainly, they're talented, but yeah, that is a much more common model for them to have, like, just be given a spec and to go build it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are exceptions to that, and there's some hybrid models. But yeah, you're right. Like, one of the things that you often get with an onshore partner, someone that can sit down with you and have a discussion with you, or probably multiple discussions, is kind of that next level up of what could this application be. Yeah, so
Definitely. And I've imagined that in large part, when you're offshoring development work, there's probably some kind of a language barrier, and that it's really difficult to convey the actual wants and the actual um, problems that you're trying to solve to someone else with a different cultural background or different language barrier in place. And that's not to say that they couldn't do it. It's just that it seems like potentially there's uh, the want for expediency at that point.
yeah, yeah. I had an interesting interaction with a potential client. I don't know, 2 years ago. Certainly before the pandemic. I can't
Yeah.
whatever whatever the before times were like.
Yeah, it's been at least a decade
Yeah.
since last year. Um,
But it was interesting because they came and were talking about the mobile app they wanted and the desktop app they wanted.
mhm.
And that was kind of where they started. And the more we talked, the more I realized these are probably not two separate apps. There are two different ways the users use the software, but we ended up building a PWA.
Mhm.
And there was, to be fair, there was like one of the front ends that was very mobile focused, and rightfully so. But had we built two different apps, there would have been a lot of duplication. The way they had it, like, there would have been things you could be at your laptop doing one thing and then have to pick up your phone to be able to do another thing.
Mhm.
And so that was really interesting to work with them through what they were really trying to achieve and show them that, yes, there was a feature set that they thought they wanted, but there was actually a better way to do what they wanted.
Mhm.
And that, I think that worked out really well for them. You had asked me about what I look for in a discovery. And I do think the way that I often think about it is I want to know, how does this thing make money for this client? I'm well aware of what custom software costs, right? So let's just, for the sake of round numbers, say it's a small project at $100,000. Okay, it's not chump change. I mean, maybe to you
Hmm.
that's chump change, but you and your GameStop millions, it's 100,000, not a big deal.
Yeah,
But
I'm my transformation to Smaug is almost complete.
but if a client comes to me and talks about software, obviously they need to have their ROI. They,
Hmm.
if they're going to spend $100,000 and they're a good business, then they're going to need to reap $100,000 worth of benefit. Sometimes that's through e-commerce. Sometimes it's through marketing. Oftentimes it's through line of business work optimization.
Hmm.
And so I always want to make sure that I understand what the payoff is. One of the reasons for that is that, it kind of goes back to some of those ilities. There are a lot of times where I could solve a problem for a client, and if it's overbuilt, then they don't see the same ROI. I don't know. Have you ever heard the phrase, anyone can build a dam that can stand and hold back water? It takes an engineer to build a dam that can barely stand and barely hold back the water.
Hmm. Yep.
Right. And so when you're doing a discovery, I think that's one of the big things is, yeah, I could build you a system that is globally redundant and, has fast load times anywhere in the world, but you've just got 10 people in an office in North Dakota. And so probably, you just need a SQL server sitting somewhere, probably close to those people.
Hmm.
And, I don't know if we've talked about it so much uh, on the stream. I know we've talked a lot about Kafka and Kubernetes offline. Those are oftentimes the right solutions, and they're also oftentimes the wrong solutions.
Hmm.
And so if I've got a client that maybe heard a buzzword and like, oh yeah, we really want to do whatever, then like kind of digging in and be like, okay, do you really need that, or did you just hear that was a good idea?
Hmm.
A lot of times, one of the big buzzwords the last couple of years was microservices. Be like, oh, we want to build this with microservices. No, you might just need a monolith because it's actually going to be way easier to deploy and maintain. And now, again, I'm
Case
speaking.
dependent.
Yeah, it's case dependent. Sometimes someone might say, hey, we want to build this with microservices. Yes, you do.
Hmm.
Thank you for being that aware of the current technology climate.
Hmm.
Um, so I would say that's maybe one of the things I look for is, what is the way to build this that is the appropriate scale.
Hmm.
Now, I think one of the things, and you kind of alluded to this, one of the things that you and I need to be cognizant of is there are other people, we have teammates that often figure out the actual features, and so maybe we don't put as much emphasis on that because we have people that do that.
Hmm.
But yeah, being the technical resource in one of these meetings, yeah, I just think there are bigger things that you have to be looking for, or maybe not even bigger, but like root
Or
cause things.
technically oriented.
Yeah,
Yep. And like I'm always, my brain is always working through like the features on a very high level. Like, okay, what is this likely to mean for us?
yeah,
Um, what does that produce? Um, so it's like, I don't know. It's not a common thing that I get to do a lot. Mostly I get brought in usually after the discovery, and they're like, okay, here is this impossible task. You go do it. And then I say yes, and I'll have another one too if you're at it. And
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
yes, may I have more pudding, please? Uh,
So let me say one other thing that I am still definitely learning that happens in the discovery process. And this isn't just the discovery process, but it happens to me the most there. And that is when to know when to stop talking. Like there are things in my mind that want to come out of my mouth, and I need to not say them sometimes, specifically when they're technical thoughts and I have a non-technical audience.
hmm
And I've been this person, and I've been around other people and watched other very talented developers make the same mistake, where you have a handful of business users, not technical at all,
hmm
and they say something about wanting to sell something, and you're like, oh, it would be great. We could use this back end for front end pattern, and we could use Kafka, and all of a sudden they're like, I don't even know what you said. Might as well have been speaking Swahili.
hmm
And so I have to think, these people don't care about that. I should save that thought and tell it to Brock, because
hmm
he will care about the interesting technical thought I just had.
hmm
And sometimes
It's hard.
sometimes it comes down to not saying it. Sometimes it comes down to saying it in a way that makes sense to non-developers. Can I communicate about having a system that is going to be widely available without
hmm
getting into the finer details of cloud hosting or site reliability? Yeah,
hmm
and another comment in the chat. Thanks to Taylor and Code, but yeah, it is a common problem among technologists. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. Like
hmm
I'm learning. I'm in the
Uh,
12-step program.
yeah. Someday you'll get to graduate. Um,
Hi, my
uh,
name is Eric. I have a problem wanting to talk about technology to people that don't care about technology.
yeah. And I feel like over the past, I don't know, year, or I guess the last decade that was last year, um, I I feel like I've gotten really good at removing the technical stuff out. Although I do get it fall into, oh hey, I'm my brain is like, no, it's this technical stuff has to come out right now. But I'm really good at figuring out how to say things in less technical ways. And that is incredibly uh, shocking to me because I don't feel like that's something I should do, but it's a skill that I have acquired. Um, and I feel like I'm going to be putting it into practice tomorrow or during my, well, not tomorrow, but next week during my discovery. So,
Have you ever had that feeling where you're with a bunch of non-technical people talking about a potential software project, and you get all these pent-up ideas, and then you finally find the person that speaks your language, and all of a sudden you're just like blah blah blah, blah. Just all over the map.
invariably, that will occur. And then it's about that point that I realize that they aren't nearly as technical as I thought they were. It's like, oh, man. Um, it's like like around here, when people ask, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I make computers do magical things." That's anything more than that, they're not going to understand. It's like, okay.
I feel like I've been in a couple of situations where I was in a discovery, and there was maybe someone from the other team, or someone from the client that is technical.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're in this more business oriented meeting, and then at some point you get an aside, either over a meal or to break or whatever. You get to talk to that person, and then it's almost like, you remember the old dial-up handshake where the two modems would have to figure out what speed they could talk at,
Yeah, what
right?
baud?
Where you're like trying to figure out, okay, do you know this term? Do you know this term? And then like you would establish a baud rate, and then all the communication just starts to happen.
Yep, that it's funny when I never really thought about it like that, but that does happen quite often, and now I'm not going to be able to think about anything else except for hearing the modem handshake noise in my brain as I'm talking with someone else um, on those topics.
Yeah, that is a good analogy though, right? Because sometimes you
Yeah.
have people that have some kind of professional experience with some software development. Um, you know, something that
And
used to happen way more often was we would get brought in to make a proper web application out of something that had been developed in Access,
hmm
right? And so then you'd have the conversation with this engineer that had developed this system in Access, and like, okay, you wrote a lot of code, like you did something.
hmm
Um, and so then you're like trying to figure out like what level can I have this conversation,
hmm
and then you kind of you find that right baud rate and like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I usually see that type of thing uh, with just trying to find the right vocabulary.
Yeah.
That seems to be the biggest stumbling block that I find with people. Um, and that's why when I'm mentoring people or putting people through the senior path or the architect path, that I focus a lot on vocabulary, and that's what we read. But in talking through what we're talking through, we can start communicating experiences and benefits of these principles and techniques and patterns, and build up this really large dictionary that will enable us to have a tremendous conversation in a very small amount of words. Because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to say more than I have to. I feel that's not accurate anymore. I feel like most people that have been uh, around me are like, yeah, he kind of like hearing himself talk. But,
So one other funny story that came up recently, and this was in a like a discovery for an application. Like we're discovering features we're going to add on.
hmm
And this is an application that Aptera had built literally 15 years ago. So we built it
hmm
15 years ago, and it's been in production use ever since with almost no maintenance.
hmm
Um, and one of the funny thing is that client calls that application, not anything else, the specific piece of software we wrote for them, they call that application Aptera, right? And it's it is this, in fact, an application they built. And so when we got on our last call with them, I said, hey, let's just set some terms,
hmm
because I have a hard time, like my mental model for what Aptera is a software company.
hmm
I know that when you say Aptera, you mean this application, but just know that if I say, and I forget what the app title was, like if I say
hmm
this, I mean the piece of software you call Aptera, and when you say
hmm
Aptera, I'm going to assume you mean this application, right? And so it's kind of funny to say, like, all right, we've got to be clear about what this term means here.
And we do get some clients that they preface whatever it is that we build for them. They preface it with Aptera. And it's like, well, I don't know that. I mean, that's great that that our name is tied to it, I guess, but I kind of feel like that's missing the point, and like you shouldn't have to think about like who built it or something.
Yeah.
It should be part of your workflow, and um, hopefully integrates seamlessly. Uh, if not, I guess we'll get it better. We'll do it better next time.
All right. Well, we should wrap this up. This has
Yeah,
been fun. I'll be curious to hear how this discovery goes for you.
it it will be interesting. I'm sure I will have lots of takeaways, and you, no doubt, will be the victim of any technology curiosity benders that happen upon um, uh, through this process. So yeah, you've just obligated yourself.
All right, my friend. I'll look forward to hearing about it when we talk next week.
Definitely.
We'll see it.
Yeah, see ya.